It's been largely overshadowed by the Trump transition, but Hillary Clinton, her husband, and her inner circle are engaged in a blame game about her defeat, and that has started to generate some headlines.
But we're also learning more every day about the unprecedented Russian plot to swing this election. And this is something every American should be worried about. No kidding. You know, we have to recognize that, as the latest reports made clear, Vladimir Putin himself directed the covert cyber attacks against our electoral system, against our democracy, apparently because he has a personal beef against me.
And do you believe this is a free and fair election?
Well, look, I think the Russians clearly intervened in the election, and I think that now we know that both the CIA, the Director of National Intelligence, the FBI all agree that the Russians intervened to help Trump, but the media didn't cover itself with glory on the way they handled, I think, the matter. The New York Times reported this week in their own reporting said that they became an instrument for Russian intelligence.
I watched her battle through that bogus email deal, be vindicated at the end when Secretary Powell came out, and she prevailed against it all. But, you know, then at the end we had the Russians and the FBI deal, but she couldn't prevail against that.
The former president also told the Bedford, New York Record Review that Donald Trump doesn't know much, but he knows how to get angry white men to vote for him.
Those angry white men that Bill Clinton is talking about are the same, quote, angry white men that got him elected president, and were the same angry white men that Bill Clinton was complaining about for months that the Clintons weren't reaching.
But are the media avoiding an in-depth examination of why the Democrats really lost and whether they'll keep losing? Joining us now, Susan Faricio, chief congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner, and A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics. So, Susan, 6 weeks after the election, Bill Clinton's talking about the bogus email deal, angry white men, and his grousing is becoming pretty big news.
Well, what's being drowned out, really, is what you said, a close introspection of why Democrats weren't able to win an election that everybody thought they were going to win very easily. But you can't ignore what influence the Russian hacking or the late FBI letter from Director Comey to the Congress had on the election, because it was a close election. The outcome, she won the popular vote by several million votes. These are all good arguments, but I do think what's being drowned out is how Democrats weren't able to reach out to the voters in those key swing Rust Belt states.
Right.
That's the conversation we're not hearing much about.
Not much, and that's not as sexy, of course. And look, I understand when the FBI affidavit was made public this past week, the rationale that James Comey used to look into the Anthony Weiner laptop and the emails, you know, right before the election, and he made it public, and it got so much coverage. I understand Clinton people being upset about that. It was kind of flimsy, but all this drumbeat about it's Comey's fault, it's Putin's fault, it's Huma Abedin's fault, it's the media's fault. Do you think the media are buying into this blame game?
No, I mean, I think it's always a story of how the losers and the losers' team interprets the defeat, right? And they all coming at it from different viewpoints. Hillary's trying to kind of hide. She'll be embarrassed if the donors never give another dollar to the party, so she's trying to give them something to hang on to. John Podesta, campaign chairman, getting very aggressive, saying there's something broken at the FBI. They're all sort of having their different responses, but it is true what you're both referring to, which is that they don't want to look inward at how many Democratic voters just wouldn't get in the car and support her. And, you know, Bill Clinton's wrong. The email deal was not bogus. The email deal really killed off her candidacy because it showed her lying repeatedly long before the FBI letter from Comey. She was under an FBI investigation. People felt she wasn't honest. They weren't motivated to support her.
Any of these things could be said, as you say, Susan, to tip a close election. But, you know, the essential thing here is that it's hard to tell what Hillary's core message was and why she didn't connect with working-class voters. But people also forget how tense relations were between Hillary Clinton and the press. A lot of people think the press was kind of an attack for her. But the media usually love party and disarray stories. And there's been some good, smart analysis, absolutely. But I'm not seeing as much of it, especially with the Democrats now controlling nothing, Capitol Hill here, or the White House. Is it just we're all talking about Trump?
Well, I would correct you on that. I think the media loves Republicans in disarray stories. I don't think they're as attracted to Democrats in disarray. I do believe that the onslaught of attacks against Trump in the mainstream media, what you read reporters tweeting out on social media, it just shows me that the deck is stacked against Trump. A lot of reporters didn't care for him as a candidate just because of his style and his approach. And I think that's what you're seeing now in the reporting. And that's why, like, let's look what happened after 2012. There was so much attention and focus on the autopsy report from the Republicans and the fact that they were a splinter group. How would they get back together and move forward? You're not seeing any of that right now. Maybe we'll see that later, but not now, though.
And so much attention and focus on the GOP civil war over Trump during the primaries and during the general election. But do you agree that is it not the question of just that Trump's making so much news that he's soaking up all the oxygen, that there is more media interest in when Republicans are falling or having some kind of civil war? And if so, is that
ideological? I don't think at this
ideological?
moment, I actually disagree about this moment. I think what we're looking at is Trump transition makes an incredible amount of news. Some of it useless, but it's just constantly pouring
every hour.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you look at, like you said, Howie, they're not in control of anything more. So we focus on whether or not the House Democrats would re-elect Nancy Pelosi. A big mistake, they did it anyway. We are focused on the fact that Keith Ellison is the leading contender for a fight to run the Democratic National Committee. Today, you know, you're looking at still the remnants of what Harry Reid has done to First Senate Democrats in the Senate. I think there's a lot of focus on how kind of lost they are and how much in denial they're in.
But it's overshadowed in your view.
But there's a much more newsy thing. We haven't had a new president in 8 years. This is bigger news.
That is also true, and we probably never had a new president like Donald Trump who makes news just by tweeting. So Politico had an investigative report the other day that I found fascinating. The top aides to Hillary Clinton, we're talking here Jennifer Palmieri, Jake Sullivan, and others, were in pretty regular touch by email, by phone, by text, with the top organizer for this. Let's get the electors to go rogue and vote against Donald Trump and take the presidency away from him, even though he won 60 million votes. The Clinton folks never quite committed to it, but they certainly were aware of it. The media missed that story.
Well, first, I'd just like to point out more leaked emails. This time we can't blame the Russians. This is clearly coming probably from one of the electors, leaking this to Politico.
Probably, yeah.
What could Clinton's camp really do? Think about that last debate when Chris Wallace asked whether Trump would accept the outcome of the election, and he said, well, we'll see, and Clinton's response was, well, that's horrifying. And she said, that's not how democracy works.
Right.
How on earth could they now publicly get involved? So they kind of did it on the side.
So you're saying the media, the Clinton, remnants of the Clinton campaign had an incentive to hide this from the press, knowing they would be vilified for even giving tacit support to this, like, let's overturn the Electoral College. What's your take?
Well, they knew it was going to fail. But remember, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, they have to move on. I don't know what fantasies they have about their daughter running for public office one day. But all of these Democrats are scrambling for jobs. And they're going to stay in this party. They're not going to leave the Democratic Party. There's nothing left of it. So they're actually under different pressure from different interest groups and activists to remain engaged and say, yes, this is an outrage.
But in terms of the media coverage, do you think this is a big story? That they did the same thing with the recount, kind of hands off, but certainly not opposing it. But now, secretly, we're in touch with these people. And I was kind of dismissing the whole thing as, you know, a show, a side show that wasn't going to go anywhere, as indeed it did not. If I had known the Clinton campaign was in regular touch with these people, I would have treated it as a much bigger deal.
It is a much bigger story, the fact that they were encouraging it, but to the media, they were downplaying it.
Yeah.
Especially given how they played the story up at the end of October to their advantage to make Trump, I think they felt this was the nail in the coffin for Trump.
Oh, remember how crazy the media went after that third debate when he would not vow to commit in advance to obeying the results? And then, you know, I don't want to overstate it, but it's pretty fascinating stuff, particularly based on that political story. Susan Ferricchio, ABC Started, great to see you.